Well, this is going to be tricky to keep short, but as we move into the readings for week two, you're going to get a lot of information about new people. But keep in mind, almost everybody he mentions, or actually everybody he mentions in this chapter, is going to play a major role. So you're going to meet a very famous writer, Larry Kramer, and Larry is going to be talking about with some of his friends who one of this couple, Nick, is Eno's lover, is getting very, very ill. So keep in mind, these are some of the first people to get sick, and you'll hear more and more about them. And Larry Kramer is going to be one of the most influential people in the AIDS epidemic. So understand you're getting introduced to a key player. And a lot of descriptions about Nick and Eno, and then you get into a part where Larry had just published a book called Faggots. Oh God, 1979 or 80, and he's a gay man. It wasn't like he was name calling, and he kind of like Randy Shilts. The author of The Band Played On, he really comes down heavily on the gay people for their kind of love of promiscuity, and they're forgetting that they're supposed to want a little bit more than that out of their life. So Larry's going to a party, and a big party scene, and you're going to find that some descriptions of his book, and that he's kind of on the outside. Some quotes from the book I really kind of like. He's kind of on the outside, though, because of the message of the book. It was very critical. And everybody here, Paul Popham was a Marlboro man, a male model. Everybody you meet here is going to be very important to the plague and to AIDS early on. So good introduction to Larry. A lot of context, a lot of information on him. Some of his highlights, winning the Oscar or being nominated for the Oscar, all kinds of good things. And a little bit of background on Paul Popham. He's the famous model. He's gay. You find out he's kind of a closeted gay. Not only that, he votes Republican, which a lot of gay people did 40 years ago. Different kind of a world. We can talk about that. And then Paul's good friend Rick, mysterious cancers. We've got another one. And then we go over to Fire Island, Ocean Walk, and suddenly you've got Nick is sick, his friend Rick is sick, and you start getting this little cluster of some of the first people to really come down with it. And then we move into New York City. It's an election year, so you have Senator Kennedy, the San Francisco gay people wanting to push his nomination over President Jimmy Carter's, because he has a very explicitly pro-gay platform. So it's gay people trying to get a voice on the national political stage. A lot of back and forth about that. The San Franciscan gays are much more activist. They're saying, no, get it out there. And the New York City gays are saying, be quiet. Don't rock the boat. So there's that kind of a San Francisco-New York divide. And that's going to really play out in this short part on politics. And they have a big party with Senator Kennedy, who did not get the nomination. President Carter did, and he ran and lost very significantly to President Reagan. It looks like I'm getting an Amber Alert. I can't do anything about that. And then they fly back to San Francisco. And suddenly
Silver alert. Missing. Endangered elderly. Details at
okay.
http://chp.gov/alert.
All right, phone. You're interrupting, stupid thing. And then we're back onto Virginia Beach, Virginia. Nick, Eno's boyfriend, much more ill, goes to a psychic, and a psychic mentions toxoplasmosis. That's something that people never got until AIDS. It's one of those things that you get when your immune system is shot. Every one of us in any given day is exposed to this, but our bodies are strong. If your bodies are weak, it becomes an illness that gets all the way into your bone marrow. And then chapter 4, still 1980, another death back into Copenhagen. And then while we're at it, and a lot of history about pneumocystis, that's another thing that all of us are exposed to on a daily basis, but because we're healthy, we don't get it. But if our immune system were knocked out, we would get it. So we're back into a death up in Denmark, same place Gert Rask died. And then we move on to, excuse me, another strange cluster of death into France, into Belgium. So we get a lot of just kind of sprinklings of the early deaths. Nobody could figure out at the time, but they look back and realize, oh, these are some of the first cases. So we know what's going around here. And then we have another person in New York. Heard about him a little bit ago. Sick with cancer that healthy young people don't get. And then a few days later, another doctor in New York calls the first doctor. You're not going to believe it. There's another one. So things are starting to happen. People are getting sick. And then we get back to Gayton Dugas. One of the first people to get the cancer is saying, oh, you've got to talk to Gayton. He has the same thing. So we're starting to put together a cluster. And this is all important. These are going to be some of the first people to suggest that it's a transmissible disease. And then we have one of the first cases of AIDS out on the West Coast at Davies Medical Center. Kind of a party guy. And then we're back into the doctors. Selma Dritz is going to have a huge role. Dr. Selma Dritz in the San Francisco Department of Public Health. A lot more talk about sexual hydraulics and all kinds of curiously passed diseases. But really the main point after you get over the, or get around or move beyond the sexual transmission is what you have is a real problem with spreading STDs, and just a really knockout line here Selma Dritz gives to the other doctors. It's just, she kind of hits it out of the park. Then we're still in 1981. It's New Year's Eve. They've got a big party, Greenwich Village, and guess what? Paul's boyfriend, Jack, decides to tuck away for an evening with Gayton Dugas. Oh, what kind of small coincidences we get here. And then we're back to Nick's lover Eno dying as we were when we started. And it's just starting. Nobody's making connections yet. So you get in this chapter, you get a mixture of politics. And, you know, I don't expect you to be familiar with politics of 40 years ago. I know a little bit about it because I was, you know, alive and paying attention to politics then. But for many of you, this is the first exposure to American presidential politics and how it intersected gay rights in the 1980 election. So that's going to be kind of new. And you're also going to be introduced to Larry Kramer, and he's going to play a very big role. And in this chapter also, you'll get a lot of the first people to come sick as well. So it's kind of like this thing, this AIDS, this horrible illness is starting to erupt slowly out of the landscape, and, you know, like a tree coming out of dormancy, people are starting to recognize it. And so take your time with this. A lot of great vocabulary. If things don't make sense, just say that. Write questions in the margin. You don't have to figure everything out, but just read it honestly. Try to get the main ideas for each section. The sections are broken by these little, whatever they are, little icons. and try to get the best quotes for the main idea. That's always what you want to do when you're writing, when you're reading rather, and getting ready to write. And keep a good eye out for vocabulary, and we'll kind of get a little bit more systematic about how to effectively keep a journal on a book, and we'll also work on the vocabulary for everything up to page 42 when we meet again on Monday. So we'll see you then, and this is your reading homework for the weekend, okay? Now, how do I do this? I click stop, I think. Yeah,